The
Why?
boundary
This
dispute.
fence needs to
It
be fixed
started with a
properly
simple
this time.
orange stake in the
I'm
ground.
tired of
At
temporary
first, I thought it
solutions.
was a utility marker, nothing serious. But the next morning, I woke to the sound of men hammering fence posts right along my property line. I stepped outside in my boots, coffee in hand, and found 3 HOA contractors digging up my yard like they owned it. "Excuse me," I shouted. "What do you think you're doing?" One of them, clipboard in hand, said, "We've been instructed by the HOA to realign the boundary to HOA standards." HOA standards? That was new to me. I'd lived in this house for 7 years, long before the new HOA board was formed. I paid my dues, kept my yard clean, and minded my business. But this was different. They weren't just trying to manage the neighborhood. They were trying to claim my land. That afternoon, I got the notice. A neatly folded letter in my mailbox with bold lettering. Notice of property adjustment for community aesthetic compliance. It claimed that my yard extended 12 feet beyond the allowable community boundary, and that the association reserves the right to reclaim said area for uniform landscaping. I laughed out loud. Reclaim? This wasn't their land, it was mine. I bought it fair and square. I called the HOA president, Karen McConnell, a woman known for her strict interpretation of every rule imaginable. She answered in her usual clipped tone. "Mr. Davis, the HOA has determined that your property infringes on common grounds. The fence will remain." "Not a chance," I said. "You're building on my property. Remove it, or I will." She replied smugly, "If you interfere with HOA contractors, you'll be fined." That's when I knew this wasn't going to be solved with polite phone calls. That night, I went through my property deed, measurements, and survey maps. The line was clear. They were wrong. Dead wrong. But instead of tearing their fence down, I decided to get creative. If they wanted to claim territory, I'd make it impossible to reach. The next day, I rented an excavator. The rumble of the engine echoed through the neighborhood as I began digging a trench around my property line, 3 feet deep, wide enough to be unmistakable. Karen showed up within the hour, waving her phone and yelling, "You can't do that. You're violating neighborhood standards." I grinned. "No fence on my land, no problem. This is a drainage project. You like things neat and uniform, right?" She turned red, furious. "You'll regret this, Mr. Davis." Maybe. But as I watched the trench take shape, I knew one thing. This wasn't just about land. It was about freedom. By sunset, I had a muddy ring circling my entire house. It wasn't a moat yet, but the idea was already forming. If they wanted to fence me in, they'd have to cross the water first. Karen declares war on the moat. The next morning, I woke to the sound of chaos outside my window again. Karen had returned, clipboard in hand, flanked by 2 HOA board members and a man wearing a city inspector badge. They stood at the edge of my freshly dug trench, staring into it like it was the Grand Canyon. Karen's voice carried across the yard. "This is a blatant violation of community aesthetics and safety regulations." I stepped onto my porch, sipping my coffee like I was watching a morning show. "Good morning, Karen. Lovely day for landscaping, isn't it?" She jabbed her pen toward the moat. "This ditch is unauthorized construction. It's dangerous, unsightly, and a violation of Article 7, Section 3 of the HOA Covenant." "Funny," I said, pulling out a printed copy of my property deed. "Because Article 7 doesn't apply to private land improvements within owned boundaries. And this," I pointed to the trench, "is 100% within mine." The inspector crouched down, measuring tape in hand, while Karen muttered under her breath. After a few moments, he stood up and said, "He's right. It's on his land." Karen's face twisted. "Well, it still disrupts the visual harmony of the neighborhood." I couldn't help but smirk. Then maybe the neighborhood should learn to appreciate medieval architecture. That line nearly sent her into orbit. She stormed off, snapping photos and threatening formal action. Over the next few days, I turned the trench into something more impressive. I lined it with black tarp, reinforced the sides, and ran a water line from my backyard pump. By the end of the week, the moat wasn't just symbolic, it was real, filled with shimmering water that reflected the afternoon sun. Neighbors came out to watch. Some laughed, others applauded. A few even brought lawn chairs. My moat became the talk of the street. Then came the letters. First, cease and desist construction. Then, notice of noncompliance. Finally, summons to appear before the HOA disciplinary committee. Karen wasn't just angry, she was declaring war. When I showed up to the meeting, every board member sat in stiff silence. While Karen read off a list of infractions she accused me of creating a water hazard, violating community peace, and, my favorite, encouraging anti-HOA sentiment. I replied calmly, "You built a fence on my land. I built water around it. I'd call that even." Gasps filled the room. Karen's jaw dropped. She slammed her gavel. "You're mocking this association." I leaned forward. "I'm protecting my property. If that offends you, maybe the HOA should stay in its own lane. Or should I say, on its own side of the moat." That ended the meeting fast. When I returned home, floodlights were set up across the street. HOA patrol cars idled nearby. It was clear they weren't giving up. But neither was I. The moat was only phase 1. Next came the bridge. The bridge and the battle lines. After the HOA's failed attempt to shut down my moat, things in the neighborhood got tense. I could feel the eyes of every board member watching my house like it was some kind of fortress, which, to be fair, it was starting to become. But a fortress needs an entrance. That's when I decided to build the bridge. I started early Saturday morning. 2 solid oak beams, a few planks, and a bit of engineering later. I had a sturdy drawbridge-style walkway across the moat. I even installed a rope pulley system so I could raise it when I wanted privacy. The moment I lifted that bridge for the first time, I felt like a medieval king defending his castle from invaders. And Karen was the dragon I wasn't letting in. By noon, the crowd had gathered again. Neighbors recorded videos, kids cheered, and Karen arrived with her usual entourage, clutching her clipboard like a sword. "This is absurd," she shouted from across the water. "You've turned your home into a spectacle." "Correction," I replied. "I've turned it into a tourist attraction. Maybe the HOA should start charging for tours." That did it. She stormed off, barking into her phone about city permits and environmental violations. Within hours, a code enforcement officer was at my gate, clipboard in hand. He was polite, at least. "Mr. Davis, the HOA claims you're violating drainage regulations." I handed him the paperwork. I'd prepared permits for water retention landscaping, signed off by the county weeks ago. His eyebrows lifted. "Everything looks in order. Honestly, this is creative." Karen's fury when she heard that could have powered a small city. She called an emergency HOA meeting that night. And from what my neighbor told me, the agenda had one item: Operation Drain the Moat. The next morning, I woke up to find a maintenance truck idling near my property. 2 men in reflective vests were unloading hoses toward my trench. I sprinted outside, camera rolling. "Step away from the water," I shouted. "You're trespassing." They froze. Karen appeared behind them, yelling, "The HOA has authorized maintenance of shared water resources." "Shared?" I laughed. "Karen, this isn't a pond. It's a private moat on private land." The men hesitated. I pointed to the freshly posted "No Trespassing" sign and added, "Touch that water, and you're in violation of state property laws." The workers backed off immediately. Karen's face went pale. "You'll regret this," she hissed. "We're escalating this to the county." I smiled. "Good. Maybe they'll appreciate good home defense strategy." That night, I installed motion lights and security cameras around the property. If they wanted a war, I'd give them one, legally, strategically, and publicly. The HOA thought they could scare me into submission. But all they'd done was make me double down. The bridge wasn't just an entryway, it was a message. Cross at your own risk. The moat that changed everything. For a few days, the neighborhood went quiet, too quiet. The HOA's usual patrols stopped, and even Karen seemed to disappear. But I knew it wasn't over. Whenever she went silent, it meant she was planning something big. Sure enough, on a bright Thursday morning, I found a stack of documents taped to my mailbox. Official notice of HOA litigation, unauthorized construction, environmental hazard, and defamation of the homeowners association. They were suing me. I laughed so hard I nearly fell off the porch. The HOA was accusing me of creating a hostile environment and mocking the spirit of community cooperation. Apparently, my moat was now a symbol of division. So I called my lawyer, a no-nonsense guy named Martin, who'd helped me close on this property years ago. When I explained the situation, he chuckled. "You kept records, right? Every letter, every photo, every conversation." I said. "Then relax," he told me. will turn this moat into their biggest mistake. A week later, the county hearing took place. Karen showed up with her usual fire, arms crossed, lips pursed, and enough paperwork to start a bonfire. She presented her case, ranting about aesthetics, safety, and community pride. When it was my turn, I stood calmly, handed over my property deed, survey maps, drainage permits, and photos showing the HOA fence posts trespassing on my land. The judge reviewed everything quietly, occasionally raising an eyebrow at Karen's exaggerated claims. Finally, he looked up. "Mr. Davis, your property line and construction are fully compliant with county regulations. As for the HOA," he paused, eyeing Karen, "you have no jurisdiction over private landscaping on land outside common areas." Karen's jaw dropped. "But the community standard does not supersede state property law," the judge interrupted. Case dismissed. The gavel fell. Just like that, the war was over. Outside the courthouse, Karen stormed off without a word, her clipboard clutched like a defeated flag. A few board members even approached me to apologize quietly, admitting they were tired of her power trips. When I got home that afternoon, I crossed my little wooden bridge, staring proudly at the calm water circling my home. The sunlight reflected off the moat, sparkling like victory itself. Neighbors soon followed, some curious, others inspired. One joked about digging a mini-moat of his own to keep the HOA at bay. Within weeks, the story spread across town. News crews came by for interviews. Headlines read, "Local man builds moat to protect property, wins case against HOA." It wasn't just about water and dirt anymore. It was about standing your ground. As for me, the moat stayed. I even added koi fish, a small fountain, and lights that shimmered at night. It wasn't just a symbol of defiance anymore. It was a reminder that sometimes, when people try to box you in, the best thing you can do is dig deeper and build your own moat.